So can you see me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So do you feel like a woman like me?
Uh-huh. What would you rank yourself on a scale from 1 to 10? You cannot use 7.
Would I rate myself?
Just your face.
My face when I wake up, 5, but when I put myself together, 6.
Okay. And how tall are you?
5'5".
Dress size.
I'm sorry?
Your dress size.
A 3.
Okay. So that makes you, if you give yourself a 5, that's average.
Yes.
So average looking women tend not to get high earning men. They tend to get average men.
So
did you I mean, stop right there. Breathe and digest. You're 35 years old and you can look around and see the world. You don't tend to see higher earning men with average looking women. Off rip. If you do see them, they got their average looking woman when they were both really young and he built his way up. But a man earning the kind of money you're talking about does not go for an average looking woman.
I mean, my body is not average, so.
But ma'am, you please don't make me say it.
Say what? I really just wanted some advice. I love your.
I'm giving you advice, but you're not taking it. The advice is, ma'am, you're average looking at best.
I'm taking it in, but.
Okay, but you're not accepting the fact that, okay. Average looking women. Average looking woman who's older. Average looking older woman with a 13-year-old son. Average looking woman with a 13-year-old son with a sketchy baby daddy. This gets worse every time I say something. And now you're asking for a man who's in the top 10% of men. You don't qualify for one. And you're making, I don't want to have to go there, but when you put in all these other factors, why can't you just get a man that's an average guy?
Sometimes I feel like in order to fully submit, I have to feel like he's in.
Well, then you're gonna die alone. How about that? Let me just cut to the chase, ma'am. You can feel like what you want to, but women like you die alone, straight up, because you think you're better than the men that you qualify for. And the only reason, honestly, ma'am, that I can see a woman like yourself really thinking you deserve more is because you earn more money than most people around you in North Carolina. But if your ass worked at the post office, you would not think so highly of your opportunities. And that's the reality. We don't.
Welcome to the first installment of Black Thoughts and Open Conversation. This is my friend, Bryan Freeman.
What's going on, everybody?
And, we had this early conversation about Kevin Samuels and like all the drama that he stirred up on social media. Yep. It's pretty crazy. A lot of hot takes. He's very abrasive in how he comes across, but I definitely understand like the underlying reason as to why he's coming out. It's very applicable in my life. Some of the statistics that he puts out are very African American centric, as far as like the experience that we can all relate to. We all have aunts and uncles that he talks about, and kind of like that stigmatized, like that stereotypical attitude that like Black women have been labeled, but also still face today. And it's like this underlining tone that needs to be addressed. Kevin Samuels, I don't know. His way of going about it is very abrasive, but that's what me and Bryan wants to talk about today. So Bryan happens to disagree about certain things. How about you elaborate on exactly how you feel about Kevin Samuels as a whole?
Before we dive into
into
Kev,
go for it.
He's gonna be Kev today.
Hey,
let me
proudly.
Let me talk a little bit about myself. And of course, you already know a lot of this. Obviously, I mean, we're both from PG County. Met at McNamara. Shout out to McNamara. To Mac.
Shout out Mac, class 2010.
Yep, 2010. Good stuff. So I grew up in a 2-parent household. My parents divorced when I went to college. When I went to Morehouse College. That's a 2014. Shout out to Morehouse. Always shouting out. And so my lived experience is in a 2-parent household. Working on establishing a 2-parent household. I'm married, and my wife, we're expecting our first child in August. So all of that comes into perspective when we talk about Kevin Samuels and we talking about my personal dating experiences, my experiences watching, my sisters. I have 2 older sisters, Ayla and Ashley, and then my nephew Harry. And yeah, so all of that comes into play. So Cam sent me some stuff to watch about Kevin Samuels because I just seen the memes along the internet, and like anybody, I love memes, and I love when they come in with something crazy. Like the meme was the one where it was like when women have won all arguments with men, and like the final boss, and they have to face the final boss. The final boss was like Kevin Samuels sitting in his chair, just
right.
So yeah, and it was funny. It's a funny meme. But when you really think about it, and I start to explore his content, thanks to you, so we focused in on that first video, that average at best video, where he just completely like obliterates homegirl. R.I.P. to homegirl, wherever you are.
She's still recovering.
Yeah, and it's just his style. His style is very, like you said, abrasive, aggressive. But my question to you is like, is it necessary? Is it necessary to be that antagonistic when you say you're trying to help people?
So for everybody that decided to view this, I'm going to play the video. Exactly like the meat of like the video that blew up off of social media. It's called the Average at Best video, which you can see on YouTube in full. It's about 20 minutes. But as far as just to answer your point, I think he does have to come off that strong, that abrasive for women specifically to get it. I don't know if it's going to work, but putting it politely and sugarcoating it and taking the edge off that you would otherwise give to a man, so in order to receive a message, like you would have to, in his way, like the strict way that a man would understand and grasp like a concept, he's trying to apply that to like a woman. And women, it's hard, straightforward, like brutally honest information that is going to, I feel like, is going to have women come to grips with themselves and who they are and challenge themselves on like exactly what they need to do to change what they feel like they need to change to get the quality of life that they need. But I think it is necessary to be that abrasive, just like my father had to, tell me kind of sternly, about certain things. It sunk in when he, put his foot on it. But, women oftentimes get into their emotions when things are a little more, jarring, a little bit, the pill is a little bit harder to swallow. So he's fighting that, like the nature of a woman, I feel like is emotional. So it's like, he has these talks with women on his podcast, and oftentimes it's like they'll do these things where he has like the steps of women that, when they try to deflect responsibility or accountability in situations, it's like shame, insults, guilt, and the need to be right. It's like his top 4. And when I talk to my girlfriend, I'll use her for an example. She tends to follow these steps.
What are the steps?
The shame, insults, guilt, and the need to be right. Making somebody, it's like redirecting accountability and responsibility in an argument. And it's very creative. Like I used to think my girl was doing this on purpose, and I used to be like, yo, I feel like you're lying to me. Yeah, but it's like you're gaslighting on me. You're gaslighting me when you're saying something happened that didn't happen, or you're misportraying something that happened and saying that.
What's an example so I can understand?
Where do I begin with that?
We got to get examples.
Like an example. Let me see. We could be talking about like
you Googling the example?
No. I saw something on Twitter.
Damn.
My TikTok is about to go off. I saw something on Twitter that was a little bit more accurate as far as like the steps. I was talking to my friend about this the other day. I was trying to find the tweet real quick.
Well, while you're doing that,
yeah,
I can hop in here.
I got you. Thanks.
So and I know I've watched a couple of Kevin Samuels videos. I haven't watched his entire portfolio. Obviously, he's got tons of videos. But one of the things I've seen consistently is that when people bring up disagreements with Kevin Samuels and reference educational literature, such as concepts around, white supremacy, Black empowerment, feminism, history, he tends to shoot a lot of that stuff down. He himself says, I'm not a therapist. I'm an image consultant. I'm not this, I'm not that. So I know he stays in his lane, but to truly help someone, you have to really explore all of the lanes. So, for example, myself, I go to therapy on a regular basis. It's important. I think everyone should go to therapy. I think the Black community has a dire need for therapy. But one of the things that I've worked on in therapy is effective communication. There was a time period where, for example, with speaking with certain people, specifically like my in-laws, I would try to say something and communicate something, and it would backfire. It would make them upset, or it would trigger them, or they wouldn't understand, or it would go past them. And
like what?
So
something that would trigger them.
So there were just discussions, like, for example, my future sister-in-law, we were watching football, and me not thinking, because I just rock like, everybody can do anything. And so we were watching football. She turned it on. It was like Thursday night football. And then I just, out of nowhere, I was like, oh, you ever play any football? Like, I didn't think it was a big deal. That was a big deal.
To her?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. And I didn't think it was a big deal because, we got the Powder Puff leagues, and we got the women's league in DC and all.
Oh, no. She probably interpreted that as like, you calling me like, I'm the size of Jerome Bettis.
Yes,
like,
that's how she interpreted it. I did not mean it that way. I was just like, oh, anybody can play football. Right. And so in learning effective communication, it's not necessarily what you're saying. It's understanding your audience. It's making sure that your message can reach them. So instead of saying, you ever play football, I learned I could have simply said, hey, what sports you play growing up? And that's the same question. I'm getting the same information that I was seeking, but I'm catering it to my audience. And that's something that you learn as a form of effective communication. And if you are a coach and you are trying to form lives and benefit people, communication has to be at the root of your message. Otherwise, you're losing people. So I know he's not a therapist. I know he's not a psychologist. I know he's not a theorist. I know he works only in the practicality and the left brain. We can talk more about that because I've been doing some reading on left brain, right brain. Yeah. But if you are truly trying to nurture the whole person, which I would say as an image consultant, that's impossible, then you need to work on your communication.
Yeah, I don't think that's his goal. It's to nurture anybody's whole person.
At all. And that's a problem. Because so many people come to him.
I don't think it's his problem, because he's like, the way I see an image consultant is like, what was that movie when that guy changed Steve Carell's whole style up? Whatever it was. It's like they rate people. Like they'll assign a number. They'll say like, you need it.
Hitch? No.
Nah.
Okay, wrong movie. I don't watch a whole lot of movies.
It was something. It was like
don't cut this from the tape.
It's one of those famous white boys. But he was the lead. But no, like they're like in this movie, the image consultant, both guys, the client and the actual image consultant, he was like, oh, you gotta tighten this up, you gotta do this, you gotta do that. You had to just be very critical of somebody. That's the thing. Like the world is critical of people. Like we live in a critical, real world. You know what I'm saying? Like the fact that somebody can call you a 5 or a 6, you know what I'm saying, is not an insult, honestly, because it's this thing like where women have like this false sense of like, oh, I'm a 10. Like I'm like the baddest thing out here. Like I'm a 10. Like it's good that that your self-esteem is a 10. You know what I'm saying? Wait, it's good that you feel like a 10.
Why is that a trait just for women? Because I see that in men all
because
the time.
I see it from the most. I don't see men like saying that they're 10s. I feel like men would be a little more realistic. Like how they look.
I live in DC, right? And my wife, she likes to walk the dogs down the street. And, you know, I know I'm going to come off a little crude, but we got the men's shelters right up the street, right? So we got the men's shelter.
Yeah.
We got the needles everywhere in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
We got, you know, sometimes some gun violence. We got all types of stuff. We got the gangs. We got a lot going on in little old DC. I'm going to say what neighborhood, but we got a lot of neighborhoods.
I was about to shout it out.
Don't shout out the neighborhood. Nah, no. Well, if you do, we can cut it or we can leave it in. Anyways, she be walking down the street. My wife is beautiful. You know, she's always done up, always pristine, always carries herself in a certain way. And every time she walks down the street, you got men that are just like, if you're talking about, you know, the value scheme that Kevin Samuels presents, they're at the bottom of the totem pole, according to his value scheme, right?
Yeah.
They all holler constantly. Yeah. You got men pulling up in rundown cars hollering, just like, so like to me, that's the same thing. Like, oh, you know, I reasonably believe that this situation can work out, that this woman would be attracted to me. And I know there's plenty of women that get those situations through catcalling. You know, the Me Too movement has highlighted catcalling. And it's, to me, that's the delusion of men. Like, so many men walk down the street and say, oh, she's fine. I bet I can, you know, attract her. I bet I can seduce her. And that's the same thing to me. To me, it's the same thing. You're overrating yourself. And so I don't think that is exclusively a women's trait. I think both men and women overrate themselves, and it just manifests in different ways. Women overrate and say, I want this type of husband. Men overrate and say, oh, I want this woman to sleep with me. It just looks different. And it looks stupid on both ends. I
think that's a difference of conditioning. I feel like men who just like holler and catcall at women know that they probably don't measure up, but they have nothing to lose. Like, men are used to like rejection over the years. Like, they were used to being the aggressor, like in like all of these like situations trying to get women. Like, women don't know how to be on that side. Even though if women were the aggressors, they would have a higher success rate, because the likelihood that a man will accept your advance is way higher than a woman accepting a man's advance. Okay, like, even if a man has a girlfriend or something going on, he'll probably still weigh the options to still like pursue. But the point is, as far as like,
no, I disagree. Okay, I disagree. So, all right, let's go back to the catcalling situation. Right? Okay. You know,
I don't think they're assessing that they're on the same level, more so than they like what they see. Let me see what I can. Let me just roll the dice. What I got to lose, especially the homeless people at the homeless shelter. Like, what they got to lose.
This is also just everyday men. This is like men up and down the scale. But when you talk about, you know, okay, going back to this high value man concept Kevin Samuels discusses, you know, taking my wife out of the equation. But if you're, you know, a standard black woman and you're approached by, you know, a man that fits your criteria, you're gonna say yes. So it's like understanding value. Like, women will say like, oh, this person's not on my level. Same way men will say that. It's just, I think it manifests differently. Men pursue and go after things that don't make sense all the time, same way that women do. And I think a lot of that has to do with social media. A lot of that has to do with our environment. But I think everyone has this Disney fantasy or this, you know, hyper masculine, I'm going to, you know, smash everything that's walking fantasy. I just think it manifests differently.
I don't think everybody has that idea, you know, to smash everything. I think that's a very masculine trait, to want to go out and like conquer everything as far as like a man, like sexually. And then, you know, I think naturally men want to procreate and have
women
their own.
Don't want to procreate?
Have their own family. Yeah, I think they more of them do than is shown publicly in society, especially like in modern days with like this hot girl summer stuff. Yeah, I was looking at some of like the City Girls lyrics. So crazy, like the stuff that they're talking about. Like, just
men have been making lyrics like that.
I got decades, you. So. You know what I see? I feel like it is over time. Like, hip hop derives from masculinity. You know what I'm saying? And so like it's hip hop got to a certain, especially with like Big Pimpin' with like Jay-Z and stuff. I think it's somewhere like the economic structure, like masculinity has always been like the hierarchy in America, in American society. But as far as like the modern times, like where women's rights started happening and like equality started to become a little bit more feasible, and you could like see that in like the economy and like job choices and voting rights and just women's rights all around and stuff like that. Like women started to make more, and so like the scales actually did even out. And when the scales evened out, women started to come a little higher. They started to make more, become more employed in like higher positions. They started to be the breadwinners of families. The stay-at-home dad was becoming more, commercialized, especially today. And it's like,
is that stay-at-home dad? Is that
I mean
in the Black community?
Well, I'm talking about in society. I'm talking about just in society, period.
I'm trying to think if I know any stay-at-home dads.
I know a couple.
Really?
Yeah. It's just like women just make more, so it makes more sense for the men or somebody to stay home, be the caretaker.
Are they young?
30s ish. I don't have any like close friends that are like stay-at-home dads, but I know like coworkers that are that or that have that structure, operate in that structure. It's just like, okay, cool. I've seen it on TV. Wow. I started to see it more and more. But I mean, it makes sense. It's like, you have a woman staying home. Like if you want to go traditionally, like a woman just staying home and the guy being the breadwinner, it's just flipped now. Like the attitude part that I wanted to touch on.
Oh Lord.
I found that thing that I was looking for on Twitter.
All right. Let's talk about masculine and feminine traits.
Okay, just to point out that thing that I was looking at on Twitter, it was shame, insults, guilt, and the need to be right. That was Captain Samuel's for women deflection mechanism. We're going to talk about women's communication techniques as they do. But a more accurate one that I saw on Twitter was the woman's playbook: deflect, gaslight, shame, and emasculate. I can talk about a specific story. Maybe you can too.
I thought we were going to talk about feminine and masculine traits.
Well, you wanted to talk about that.
Let's stop there. Then we'll do this because it's a lot. All right.
Okay.
So historically, right, when we're talking about being very primal, you had the men who went out and hunted, and you had the women who were more of domestic responsibilities.
Mm-hmm.
Continue that into the modern era. You have the men who were the breadwinners, because that's the way the laws are written, to only allow for men to be breadwinners, to only allow for men to have rights in voting. And the women had to, again, be domesticated.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until recently that women started to have those same rights. And during that same time, you had, within the Black community, an intentional separation of families, whether that's through the introduction of drugs, whether that's through project housing policies where you can't have homes that have two parents in them in order to qualify for assisted living. Mm-hmm. So the government did things to intentionally separate Black families historically. And it's part of that trauma you mentioned.
Yeah, but I don't know if that was deliberate to for Black families more so than like. Oh, I saw a video like Kevin Samuel, somebody else made it. They were like, public housing and like Section 8 was put there as a temporary solution, as it still is supposed to be a temporary solution, because I guess, families were broken and that was just like an assistance until you got your feet up under you. But it ended up being a permanent thing once more people started to take that government assistance, that free money, and just started to just ride it out like it was just a free, benefactor money as a situation. So I think it was just like a snowball effect.
But then you talk about getting your feet underneath you. Mm-hmm. I mean, we really have to understand historical context. Like, our families, we came off the plantation. You have situations where Black communities would thrive and where they would be Black millionaires and wonderful businesses. You have numerous situations where all that would get destroyed. You have Jim Crow laws. You have all these things in place to intentionally disenfranchise Black people. And in the modern era, we're just now beginning the phase of recovery. And in that phase of recovery, that first generation was, a lot of women having to be the breadwinner, having to be the single mother because of, what they've done to Black families. And then the school to prison pipeline with Black men. So all of this is systemic. And you can't just identify this is what the individual is doing without looking at the macro. Because what drives individual actions is the macro. And so it's like we need to include all of that in our analysis and say, all right, Black women had to be the heads of families. They had to adopt those masculine traits for survival. They had to be the breadwinners, and they had to be the nurturers. And sometimes you would have to forego one or the other because it's a lot for one person. And like you said, generational trauma, and that's why the Black community needs lots of therapy because of the intentional trauma that's been inflicted on us.
I agree.
And it manifests in so many different ways. And one of the ways it manifests now is in dating and relationships, because we have generations that are raised with the norm of single parenthood. And that's a trauma that's deep within a lot of us. And only way to overcome it is through, deep introspection and unlearning those curses.
But part of that is Black women, and they're playing.
What? What?
Part of that is looking at Black women because,
they had no choice but to be who they are.
We can't. Everything isn't like a macro. We can't take like this is representative of everybody.
Well, of course, it's not representative of everybody, but it influenced a large portion of the community.
It does, but now that we're here now, we still need to focus in on like Black women's like role in these relationships as well. I feel like something that I've noticed. I really didn't touch on my background like Bryan did in the beginning of this segment, but this looks like a good transition to do so.
We're first podcast, Will.
Yeah,
first attempt.
Wigging it. We have similar background. Well, we come from similar places. I come from PG County. Went to McNamara, same high school in Forestville. I initially grew up in a 2-parent household. Parents split up. I'd say like whatever, like 4th grade, 5th grade, like 2003, 4, something like that. And so my father was my primary caregiver from like 10 years old going forward. So a lot of the lessons I've learned through him. So in a sense, that's my bias. Like, Bryan has his bias and his different upbringing. But a lot of that stuff allows me to share the same, perspective as Kevin Samuels. Well, I kind of identify with him. He threw out a stat like a while ago. He said, 1 in 4 Black women, get married. Even though we looked at the stat on Black demographics, more like a, like a third. And it's like 50% don't get married. It's like 30% were married at the time of the census. Like the other were like, separated, widowed, and like whatever other.
That stat was hella confusing.
Yeah. But in my experience,
but 50% of Black women approximately and 50% of Black men approximately never get married.
Yeah.
So it's relatively close.
Yeah, it's pretty close. Yeah. I don't know. Like in my experience, like how I was raised, oftentimes I don't know. It's definitely trauma. I feel like even like how Black people use the N-word, I feel like that's trauma. Like we Black people have a way of just making like the wrong shit cool somehow. And it was just like I feel like Black people should have that still, just as a result of slavery. We should be able to have that among other things. But it's a way we got to like undo a lot of the trauma, but we have to be able to be open and still hold ourselves accountable for stuff that we do.
All right. So
men aren't
that trauma. Okay. Yes, we do have to be accountable for undoing our trauma.
Yeah.
Kevin Samuels is not the person you should go to when you need to undo your trauma.
He could help.
He should be the last stop on your journey. You should start with your therapist.
He could help.
You should start with wellness. You should start with mental services, spiritual services. And then at the very last stage, when you're ready for some image consulting and how to go out and present yourself in the world.
No,
that's when you go to Kevin Samuels.
That's terrible.
You don't need it. He himself tells people you need therapy. He says that constantly, every session. Yeah. You need therapy, and he is not a therapist.
But
so
he's an image consultant.
They need to go get their therapy first. You cannot present your best self if you don't even know who you are.
Yeah,
and that's what the therapy.
And they're calling him because
they're lost.
They're lost, and they're looking for him for direction.
And his direction is therapy. That's it.
Right.
I have not watched a single video where Kevin Samuels has not said you need therapy. I've watched at least 10. And he's like, you need therapy. You need therapy.
He doesn't say it every time.
Oh,
but
he be hitting that therapy.
He be hitting that therapy because he really wants people to go to therapy and get like weekly therapy. But he's not ashamed to give people a reality check. If they call into his show and they start talking delusional and this hyper reality shit that they be talking about, he's not afraid to keep it a buck. And I admire him for that.
But a lot of times they're not even ready for that because they need the therapy first.
Too bad.
They need the trauma first.
You called in.
But
if
you're truly trying to help people, you can say, talk to me after you have seen so many sessions with a therapist. I know he doesn't have to do that. It's his platform. He loves to tell us it's his platform, and he's going to say what he's going to say. But going back to that communication piece, if you truly want to effectively communicate, you could say therapy first, and I'll be here once you get your mental health together to help you, present yourself in the best light.
I feel like some people that he talks to treat his consultations and his advice as therapy. Even just watching his YouTube videos,
they don't be listening.
It's not always.
They don't be listening.
It doesn't always work against them. Sometimes it's just a harsh reality check that they really just needed to wake them up and be like, okay. And he highlights some of these people like I've through my consultations and like my YouTube, my efforts, 3 people, I've engaged 3 couples, and I've gotten, other relationships started. He talks about getting DMs and like comments about, women thanking him for saving their marriages and stuff. And I believe it. Like some women need like reality checks and stuff. And
some men
do too.
I'm honing down on women. That's another thing. That's another thing.
Hey, men need work too. No. And he talks about men.
He does talk about men.
He talked about men. A lot of people don't know.
Yep, he did.
He talked about men before he talked to women.
Right.
As harshly, if not worse.
He was cooking them.
He was calling men
and
fat.
That was equally not helpful.
It was just as helpful. And people were like, okay. Because you know what people were doing prior to that? Making excuses. Lying to themselves, talking about they 10s. They cool. Incompetent. I'll get to it. You know what I'm saying?
Nowhere.
I got time.
Monuments of nothing. And those who use them sell them onto anything.
Yeah, hilarious. But I'm just saying, like, sometimes we do lie to ourselves, even with smoking. Like, I'm just talking like on a realistic, like practical level, like just relating. Like, I got time. Like, I can stop smoking, but smoking's gonna reel you back in, and you know what's gonna come once you run out of weed. Once you run out of like your fix, like you're gonna think about that because you're already habitualized to it. So I'm like, sometimes you need somebody to smack you like you need to stop, or else you're not gonna like get to where you want to get to in life. And sometimes that calls you to sit back and be like, oh damn. And then, you don't necessarily have to go to therapy twice, 2 times, 3 times a week to get that message for it to sink in. Sometimes you just need one good punch in the face.
But you
to wake you up.
I don't think it's.
But that's a man's approach to it.
I don't think it's this or that. I think it's a yes and. That's one of the techniques I learned in therapy, by the way.
What do you mean?
The yes and,
What do you mean?
So like, if someone says a point and you agree with that point, and there's more, you hit them with the yes and.
Yeah.
And therapy.
Yeah, a lot of people use that, but.
Yeah, that wake up call could be something that works for certain people.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully it triggers that therapy. Especially, I was listening to a lot of the men's stuff last night while I was playing 2K. Shout out to that face scanner they got. The player kind of looked like me from the side. That was kind of cool. But anyways, he was cooking them. And I was just like, man, it was a lot of hurt men, just hurt. And Kevin Samuels is not person to help you with your hurt. You need a therapist. You need a mirror. You need a sounding board to walk you through those issues and dig those up.
These are like traditional strategies.
that's their traditional strategies for whole people. Okay, the thing is, okay, so
Whole people.
let's get into that. Let's get into that for whole people.
Oh,
I'm being completely serious. So, watching Kevin Samuels videos led me to Mrs. G. That's her YouTube name. But she wrote a book. She wrote a book called Man Leads. I ordered the book. I'm gonna read it. I'm gonna let y'all know what
you got more and more into this subject than I even know.
I told you I be going. It took me a lot of places.
I'm proud of you.
Whatever.
Glad
Anyways,
wrong,
so she wrote the book, and she basically has a wife school in Senegal where she teaches traditional wife skills and how to attract a certain type of mate. Usually the high value man that Kevin Samuels is discussing. Those two, they're like one and the same. But her approach, her communication style is a lot more woman friendly, I would say. I lost my point. I lost my point. We're going to have to cut this.
You looked up a lady on YouTube.
But before that, what was I saying before that? You said something.
Your vision board. That's what whole people do.
Oh, yes. Whole people. There we go.
Let me apologize to the partial people that might be watching this.
So a lot of that program that she's talking about with the wife school has to deal with therapy. They do so much therapy work. They don't even talk about any, and I'm not saying I agree with the wife school or anything. All I'm saying is they got that therapy piece and they start with that. And you cannot move on until you've done enough introspection to truly understand this is who I am. This is how my experiences have shaped me. And this is how I can navigate them in the future. If you don't have that, you can't even apply image consulting appropriately because you're living a lie.
But image consulting, depending on how it's delivered, might allow you to be more open to therapy. Therefore, his steps on how he works might be appropriate for some. Then again, therapy isn't like foolproof either. Like people back out of therapy all the time, relapse and all that shit. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I feel like sometimes therapists, at least for Kevin Samuels, sometimes there are therapists that won't talk to Kevin Samuels because of his approach. I feel like there's a personal bias that's being mixed into therapy.
We're going to hit that time.
You know what I'm talking about?
No. So therapy. Okay, let's talk about therapy. So my wife, she was previously in the marriage and family therapy program at Virginia Tech. That program is closing, and it is really a horrible story. Look up that if you're interested. Anyways, therapists do not give their opinion. They use different theories and techniques so that you come up with a solution. So you'll talk to a therapist and you'll say, I'm having this issue. They'll ask questions. How did that make you feel? Why did this happen? Give me some more background. What do you think is next steps? How could you have handled that better? They are a sounding board and a reflection of you. So they don't tell you, they don't coach. That's the difference between a therapist and a coach. They don't give you their opinion. They use certain techniques that apply to your situation to be an appropriate sounding board so that you uncover the answer for yourself. If they give you the answer, you're generally not going to follow it. Yeah. So they want you to come up with the answer. That's what therapy is.
I wonder how true that is, like consistently. Like I wonder how many therapists
they can lose their license for not doing that. I have had some bad therapists who didn't do that, and I left them because I was like,
have you had like a therapist that like kind of like infused their own opinion?
It was horrible. Absolutely horrible.
That's what I mean. Like therapists aren't going to always like stick to the script of therapy. Like some of them are actually going to act like people, like listening to another person.
And that's a coach.
And that's how I feel like a lot of people just end up like trying to figure it out by themselves because they just realize it's an individual problem already. You gotta. I feel like
could help.
And that's where a Kevin Samuels will come in. People already feel like they already know the answers to their questions. Like many of us do. You're like, if you want to get somewhere, you could probably in your mind be like, okay, I probably need to cut this out. I probably need to do this. I probably need to do that to get to where I want to go. And then a Kevin Samuels comes by and hits you with that harsh reality. You know what I'm saying? To wake you up. And, I feel like that's an equitable dose of reality maybe for some, but therapy's the traditional route,
But there's more to being like a person. There's more to courting. There's more to it than
we got to refocus the convo.
Than these left brain items. So I'm reading this book called The Whole Brain Child in preparation for our child who's soon coming. and it talks about emotional intelligence and how children react, right? So children are naturally more right-brained, where they rely on their emotions and they react to things. Kind of like animals, you know.
Brained it.
Animals. Huh?
That's a word.
Right, brained.
Brained.
Did I say brained?
Brained it.
Brained.
Okay.
Whatever. You know,
Brained.
English is a questionable language anyway.
Okay.
Brained, right-brained.
Yeah.
And so what you have to do is you have to make them draw connections between the right and the left brain. Otherwise, they'll grow up too strong right or too strong left. So,
in a sense, is the right brain like kind of like feminine as opposed feminine masculine traits type of thing, or like emotional?
You can think of it that way. I haven't read that part. They're not talking about feminine masculine. They're just talking about building the whole child. So I don't know. You can think about it. Research that.
Okay.
But so you get in a car accident, right? And your child's in the back of the car, right? The book is talking about your child will want to voice that and want to talk through that. And the way to help that, even when they're babies, is you talk to them and you create that connection. They will babble. They will say whatever. They will say car. They will say whatever happened. You'll say, yes, we got in a car accident. Yes, it was very scary, right? Oh, and this happened. The car crashed and it was a loud sound. And then what you do to make that connection. So you're drawing a story. They're having these emotions. They're trying to sort through them. You're drawing the story. And then what you do at the end is you talk about the resolution. Yeah, it was really scary. And then what happened next? Yeah, mommy got out the car and mommy held you and told you it was okay. And then we went to the hospital. We got checked out. And now we're back home and everything's okay. Yeah, but that was really scary. And so by doing that, you're teaching your child emotional intelligence to be able to decipher trauma, decipher issues, and to rationalize them and work through them and to let them go. And one of the things with trauma, if you don't have proper rearing with trauma, whether it's being raised by your parents to how to deal with trauma, or if you don't seek out professional help to deal with trauma, is you will manifest those traumas for the rest of your life because you're constantly trying to work through them, just like how you did when you were a little baby. So that's why I keep saying you need someone who's professionally trained to train you how to make that link. Because if you're too right-brained or too left-brained, you end up someone who's either very robotic or someone who's just overly emotional and irrational. But you need both in order to be a whole person. And that's going back to my whole person point at the beginning. You need to be a whole person before you come to Kevin Samuels. Don't be coming to him when you have a person.
That's the thing. That's like so many factors. Like everybody thinks that they're a whole person at this age. But we're all a bunch of broken people with a bunch of different issues. So now we got to figure out, and then people have to identify with the people that are getting therapy. How are they broken? Am I really broken that way? Do I feel broken that way? And do I consider myself broke? Is that something that needs to be fixed?
And this ties into exactly what I was saying about trauma inflicted upon the Black community en masse. So there's certain traumas that we as individuals will have to unravel. That's not necessarily your fault. It's traumas that you've inherited, but it's not your fault that you inherited it, but it is your responsibility to work through it appropriately, to make those connections, to use your whole brain, and to come prepared to enter the world as a whole person. So that's why when Kevin Samuels excludes that portion from his discussions, I'm like, you're not capturing the trauma. Yes, I know that's not your role. You're not a trauma consultant.
Right.
But I think there needs to be more emphasis. And I think he does say you need therapy, but I think he could help more if he's like, bruh, you need so much therapy that we can't even get to talking. So I'm going to give you this number. Hit them up. After you have a couple sessions with them, show some progress, then hit me up.
Kevin Samuels going to get his content. Kevin Samuels going to get his content.
He is going to get his content.
He
content over everything.
He going to tell you about you. He sees the same situations. I feel like he's already jaded. That's why I don't like always agree with like his points. Like
he's already jaded?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
He's jaded through life. Like he has,
Like he has trauma himself?
Yeah. Like he does have trauma himself. I feel like some of that comes off aggressively. My father always told me like,
wait a minute.
Hey,
so are you implying that Kevin Samuels is not a whole
Let me
person?
get this off.
We're not supposed to talk about
Let me get this off.
We're supposed to talk about the concepts.
He's still credible, even though he has a lot of experience that has jaded him along the way. But that doesn't mean that he can't discern right information from wrong, or like a problem that he sees, a consistent problem that he sees from, his experience. It's like a therapist who's had that, background as well, like 2 failed marriages and maybe had a stepchild and like a child um, out in a failed marriage that resulted in a failed marriage. They're still a therapist. They still went and got the education. Does that discredit them? That their life isn't all peachy keen because you don't know their background? No,
I don't think it discredits him.
Yeah, but I feel like it works for him though, because it gives you the experiences. Like like you have a background, because he says he hasn't cheated, so you can't really say infidelity was a factor for him at least. But that failed marriages, will give you experiences that a successful marriage won't, especially from his vantage point where he tries to help partner women who are looking for these high value men to find significant others as an image consultant. So he knows how the field grades them as well as others, and it kind of use them, judges them on like the macro standpoint. Like you're looking for this man, like, okay, 5 to 7% of men make $100,000 more. Okay, this is a small pool of men. You need to be proactive and put yourself in a situation where you could find one of these men and stop waiting for God to bless you and hand deliver you a man in your lap.
And so far, I don't believe I've said I disagree with what he's saying. I've been talking about his approach and the exclusion of certain things. Yeah. But what he covers,
What do you mean?
What he covers.
What do you mean what he covers?
It could be presented differently, but the concepts are there. The concepts are strong. They support the research and the data. All I'm saying is that communication piece, again, to be as effective as possible for the community. Is it effective to communicate using your trauma? I don't know about that.
I don't think he's using his trauma to communicate his point.
It comes through.
No, I'm saying.
You said it comes through.
I'm saying I can hear it. That's
you can hear the trauma.
I can hear that. I can hear it sometimes.
You can hear the trauma.
This is my opinion. Like some of his trauma, my father always told me. Like my father would told me, like he was around like his mid-50s. Like around that age, you started to get a little bit more bitter, naturally. Like you get a little bitter. You get a little edge to you, like that old man edge. Like you get like a little bit of that like grittiness about, I don't know, how your life played out. Maybe like some things that you don't, you wish you could have done, or like some regrets that you might have. You get a little bit bitter about life, how life played out. And that was just some real shit. But I'm talking about things.
This is your platform, and you're gonna talk about what you want to talk about on your
platform.
Hell yeah! All right, damn.
That's what I gotta talk about. But as far as like when we get, like when me and my significant other, when we get to an argument, like I usually see these patterns. I'm usually on the side of trying to address whatever problem. Like I'm trying to fix the problem, right? I'm a man about it. Like I'm trying to address the problem, see what it is, like the facts on the table, and fix it, right? But my girl's perspective is like, I'll voice my opinion, how I feel about it. You voice your opinion, how you feel about it. We might disagree, but we'll agree to disagree. But that's not a solution, okay? Is that a solution? You both agree to disagree, but you can't agree on any facts? Because when I present facts to the table, you're saying it didn't happen that way. Or you're trying to twist it. That's where that gap.
Communication styles is something that every couple has to get a hold on. And you cannot really get a hold on it without professional intervention, because I can't experience how I speak. I can't. Only she can experience it. And she experiences it through a lens based on her experiences. Your girlfriend can't experience, you can't experience how your girlfriend, what am I saying? Your girlfriend can't experience how you speak, right? She filters it. And the way you experience her is through your filter. You have to understand each other's filters. That's it.
Yeah.
And stuff like this will blow it way out of proportion and say, oh, women do this and women do that. Yeah, women do this, women do that. Men do this and men do that. Hey, a little bit of therapy and it's no longer an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Just a little bit. That's the easy one. I could probably knock that one out with my little bit of therapy training. Bring her in.
Let's how to deal with that problem?
Yeah, I can knock that one out.
Man, I don't even
That's
know.
an easy one. Cam, I'm telling you.
I don't think that's the easy one.
Oh, I'm telling you that's the easy one. We knocked that out in like one session. That's one session.
No.
I'm trying to think of okay. Let me tell you about
I agree with that.
Let me tell you about a bigger issue
I just don't know
that my wife and I had. When we first started dating, if she got mad at me, she wouldn't talk to me for days, Cam. Days.
See, she would throw a fit.
Days.
She got mad at me when I took when I didn't talk to her for a day. She said, "Okay, I told you this is not what we do. this is one of my deal breakers."
There's and that's something now. You know, my wife gets mad at me. She tells me immediately, and so again, no one's going to communicate effectively from the beginning. Everyone has their own style. But when you meet someone who wants to make it work and wants to figure it out, you get some help and you figure it out. And, don't overcomplicate it. People are going to have issues. You're going to walk into some dumb shit. Any relationship is going to start off with dumb shit. I guarantee you. If it don't start off with dumb shit, that's really weird. And I don't understand that. I've yet to see it not start with dumb shit. But it'll get better.
Yeah.
As long as both parties are consciously saying, okay, what can I do to make it better, rather than pointing all the blame. You got two parties that do that, you good. Good.
It's a fair discussion. It's definitely a fair discussion. I think Kevin Samuels has one of many approaches. He has like a very popular approach as of today that is very abrasive, and I feel like works for some, maybe not for others. A lot of the others will just reject it off of his approach alone and not really listen to his content, or others might listen to his content and he might say something that they identify with and might lead to them watching more of his content, and that might be their therapy. But I feel like, I guess there's like a stigma with like therapy in the Black community and like addressing Black trauma and like depression and stuff like that.
Go. So that's something we could talk about.
So that's something else that
push harder.
Yeah, and that's another thing that we need to overcome. I think I might be I need to address my own biases behind like how much therapy works, because I remember going to therapy individually, and the therapist was just saying things that I already knew about myself. I think that's what kind of shaped my opinion, and like she didn't like really identify with my demographic. Maybe it would have hit harder at that time, but I don't know. She was just saying
a Black man therapist.
That would have been better, maybe. Yeah. But I don't know. This therapist was just saying stuff I already knew. I was just like, all right, I got this. I just need to do it. But I don't know. I just got carried away in life and just never like put the stuff I already knew into practice. As many people I feel like, end up doing as we try to work through, issues ourselves. Bryan's in the beginning of a marriage. I'm in the middle of a relationship, trending towards marriage. So we're growing.
Okay, and trending. I see you
trending topic. Sharing our experiences.
Okay. Yeah, do that couples therapy.
As we're here in life, maybe
it's gonna be great.
We can identify with others in our situation, and maybe identify with people with similar experiences.
Therapists be wild too. They be like, "So how often you guys having sex?" Huh?
Yeah.
Sounds like y'all need to pick that up. I'll be like, yeah, just pick that up.
That's episode 2. It's like,
what?
Talking about no sex. Oh, maybe later. We get like a sex therapist. Oh, therapy and sex. Tie that in. That'd be dope. That'd be nice, little open conversation. So maybe get a Black therapist, sex therapist on here. Have an open discussion. That'd be lit. But this is the prototype, the first episode. Maybe you guys liked it. Tune in, subscribe. I'm gonna try to make some more content, a little bit more organized, a little bit more formal. But honestly, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised isn't the wrong word. I'm not disappointed by this episode, because it's what we talked about, and I think we touched on a lot of the big topics that we wanted to discuss on this episode. So more to come. Any final comments? Questions, comments, concerns?
I mean, all I gotta say is, just in general, Be careful what you consume. When you're looking for help, just be very mindful of the intention of the help. Someone like Kevin Samuels, which I think he does do a lot of good work, but his core function when he's on media platforms is entertainment. I'm quite sure in his private sessions, because his core motivation when he's in his private sessions is not entertainment, it's results. So I'm quite sure you'll get a different feel when you do those things. But if it's on the internet, it's there for entertainment. So just be very mindful of those things. Seek out private spaces for help, because that's where you usually receive the most authentic and personalized help. But there's lots of resources out there, and make sure you're using them to better yourself and better your community. That's all I got.
Very clean, Bryan. Very clean. Yeah,
had to do it.
Second, all that stuff. We're grown people. We've been through so much. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. It's going to take a while. Slavery was only like 250, 300 years ago. We still got great grandparents that still, has remnants of slavery in their past. Mm-hmm. But, we're growing. It's a work in progress. So this concludes the first episode of Black Thoughts and Open Conversation. Mm-hmm. Hopefully we see you guys in the near future. Stay tuned.
Woo! That was good.